What's this? A mailbag on a Thursday? The mailbag is supposed to be on Friday. It's supposed to be my favorite day of the week and your favorite day of the week. Here on the Morning Pit on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, we're supposed to do the mailbag tomorrow. Why are we doing it today? What gives? Why would I throw off your schedule like this? Well, as you might have guessed, because we've done it a few times like this in the past, we're trying to work on something for tomorrow, something a little bit different to end your week, something we'd like to, we'd like to do as soon as we can. But I think that'll probably, it'll come together for tomorrow is the tentative plan. And so when that's the case, we move the mailbag back. We do it on Thursday instead of Friday. And this is probably going to be like 2 weeks of messing up the mailbag, because next week's mailbag is going to be all, I don't see us doing a mailbag on the Friday morning after the Syracuse game. I suspect on the Morning Pit after the Syracuse game, we're going to be talking about the Syracuse game. So this is, 2 weeks of throwing your schedule off, and I apologize in advance for that, but we don't want to miss a mailbag. Like I said, we have something else we're trying to do for tomorrow, so, mailbag comes to you on Thursday. Isn't that a pleasant surprise? When you woke up this morning and you looked at your Morning Pit, you probably didn't think you were going to get a mailbag, but you are, and there's some great questions about all Narduzzi defensive back rankings, what the offensive line could look like, in the event of further injuries, and a whole bunch of other things. An interesting question about the running back situation. A couple, actually. So pretty, interesting stuff. Some interesting topics to dig into, and I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully you don't mind doing a mailbag on Thursday. I suspect that you don't. I know I don't mind it. And so let's jump into it. The Morning Pit Mailbag here on a Thursday edition of the Morning Pit on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. No fireworks or laser shows or confetti or balloons today, just a regular old Morning Pit mailbag, and I don't think we need anything special for that. Maybe a thumbs up. How about we give a little thumbs up for the Morning Pit mailbag? There we go. Always trying to get those visual elements going for you at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, and that's what we do. We have Pit videos every day of the week. These Morning Pit videos Monday through Friday, plus we have live streams, our weekly live stream like we do every Wednesday night at 8:30. We did it last night. Me and Jim Hammett get together to talk a little Pitt sports with you. I always look forward to that. Those are always fun. Last night was no exception. After games, we have a post-game show, and we're tentatively planning to do a post-game show on Thursday night after the Syracuse game, so we've got that to look forward to. Or you've got that to look forward to. I suppose I do as well, if you want to stay up late with us. Look, one way or the other, it's going to be a compelling story, right? I mean, we know whatever happens in that Pitt-Syracuse game is going to be interesting. I highly doubt there will be a dull outcome. Even if it's a blowout one way or the other, it's going to tell us a whole lot about this Pitt team and where they are heading into the second half of the season. That's going to be an interesting challenge. And we'll have a lot of time to talk about Pitt-Syracuse leading up to the game next week. For now, we've got our Morning Pit mailbag. Before we dive into it, of course, we ask you our regular requests. Like this video and subscribe, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That way you can get all of your Pit video content. You won't miss any of it, whether it's the Morning Pit or the live streams, whatever it may be. If you click the subscribe button to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, you will be tuned in for everything we do. And then check out the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com to get all football, basketball, recruiting, whatever it may be. You can find it all at Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. Kabassier Dennis, the best, arguably the best username on the message boards. Started us off here. It's one of my personal favorites, and he's got a delicious avatar of Kabassi. But Kabassier Dennis asks, you may have answered it buried in the other offensive line threads, but what configuration of offensive linemen would you go with for the rest of this year with Taylor and Jacoby out? I like the idea of getting Ryan Baer back to left tackle, but not sure how the rest would shake out after that if they went that route. So nothing official announced after the injuries of Branson Taylor and Ryan Jacoby in that Cal game. Both guys played like a dozen or less than a dozen snaps before they got hurt on separate plays, but they were both out, I think, pretty close to each other, right around the same time. Taylor replaced at left tackle by Terrence Enos, and Jacoby replaced at left guard by Jason Collier. My guess is that they would go with that lineup. I didn't think that group did poorly. I think you look at the numbers for Enos and Collier, at least according to Pro Football Focus. I think they may have each given up one or two pressures. Nothing out of the ordinary, nothing crazy. and not, any more pressures allowed than Ryan Baer and B.J. Williams in that game, quite frankly. So I thought they did fine. I didn't think there was much of an issue. You raised an interesting question about moving Ryan Baer to left tackle or whether you keep him at right tackle. I think Baer has played left tackle before or practiced at left tackle before, but I mean, even last season when he came in, he was at right tackle. And I think Enos has practiced as Pitt's backup left tackle. So, there's two schools of thought here. One, Enos has been practicing at left tackle, at least throughout the season. And likewise, Baer has been playing right tackle all season long and dating back to last year. At the same time, you are in an off week. You have a little bit of extra work or a little bit of extra time if you wanted to flip those guys. Enos clearly is their preference as the third tackle, it would seem, given the fact that he went in for Taylor. So presumably, you can maybe make a swap there with Baer moving to the left side and Enos moving to the right side. But I suspect if you're going to lose time with Branson Taylor, I kind of think they might just stick with Enos on the left side and Baer on the right side, because you have some extra time right now to maybe make a flip, but you also, that's where those guys have practiced for far longer than the 10 days or so they're going to get to work on it this week. So my thought is that you stick with that. Stick with Enos at left tackle and keep Baer at right tackle. I think Collier is the natural fill-in at left guard in place of Ryan Jacoby. It's where he played last year, played a lot last year. He played a little bit of both guard spots, but I mean, left guard left guard is the spot where Collier has played the most. So, I think that's probably the natural transition. And to be honest, I think there was a lot of consternation about Jason Collier this offseason. If they have to go with him or if Jacoby's not ready. I know the fans were, concerned about Collier playing. I think he's been fine. I think he's been better this year than he was last year. And I think he's been perfectly fine as the left guard. It's not as good as it would be with Jacoby. He's your second team offensive lineman, second team left guard for a reason. But I think it would be fine to use him there. You can keep Lyndon Cooper at center. You don't have to, because that's another possibility people have suggested is sliding Cooper outside the left guard and Terrence Moore back in at center, where he started 9 games last year, or however many. I think it was 9. And Cooper has experience playing guard, but I don't know if you necessarily need to do that. If Collier becomes a liability at left guard, then maybe that's something you look into. But I think you can stick with Cooper at center. Obviously, B.J. Williams at right guard, you can feel pretty confident about that. But then I think you can go with Collier at left guard, and then those two tackles, like I said. It remains to be seen officially what the status is of Taylor and Jacoby. I would say it's probably not optimistic about their returns, plural. I mean, we're talking about 2 guys. And so my guess, and this part is just a guess. My guess is when they line up against Syracuse for the first offensive possession, left to right, it's going to be Enos, Collier, Cooper, Williams, Baer. It would be my guess. But again, we're talking here on Thursday. The game is still a week away. Things could change. There's a lot of factors that could go into a change, but that's kind of my guess on how they'll line up. Spenges says, where would you rank this set of defensive backs, Pitt defensive backs, based on just 6 games, versus the other 9 groups under Narduzzi? And I think this is a really interesting question. I like questions like this because I have to go back and make a chart. This is my official. I didn't use the legal pad for this for a few reasons. Like, I've already filled up the back of a sheet here. I filled up this sheet. I didn't want to. This is kind of my sheet for the week, this and the back there. So I didn't really have the space to put the 9 groups of defensive backs. So I went back of the envelope here. And it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, counting this year, 10 groups of defensive backs. And I just jotted down the top 2 corners, the top 2 safeties for the season, year after year. And it's interesting. I mean, obviously you have overlap year to year. Damar Hamlin was a 1, 2, 3, basically a 4-year starter. I think he started opposite Jordan Whitehead in 2017, and then he was starting in 18, 19, and 20. So you have guys like that. Dane Jackson was a 3-year starter. Avonte Maddox is like a 3-year starter. Jordan Whitehead's a 3-year starter. So some of these guys bleed over from one year to the next. But when you look at the whole group of 4, of the top two corners and top two safeties, I think there's some interesting candidates. I mean, obviously, you've got some really good players throughout that group. Jordan Whitehead, excellent player. Damar Hamlin, excellent player. Paris Ford had a great 2019. Dane Jackson, excellent player. Avonte Maddox has, despite what his, time at Pitt looked like, and I think there were a lot of reasons why it looked the way it looked. Despite what his time at Pitt looked like, he's been a professional player, an NFL player since the 2018 draft. Since 2018 season. So that's 7 years now. He's a 7-year pro, guy getting paid to play football in the NFL. So I can't really criticize him on that. Damari Mathis is still in the NFL. I think Jason Pinnock is too. Eric Hallett and Brandon Hill, obviously. And then you get up to this year's group, with Rylan Gandy and Rashad Battle, Javon McIntyre, and Donovan McMillan. I don't know what the NFL futures are for those four guys. But I would say as I look over these groups and you see a lot of interesting combinations, I think the one that probably jumps out the most to me is 2017, where your top two corners were Dane Jackson and Avonte Maddox, and your top two safeties were Jordan Whitehead and Damar Hamlin. Now, I'm swayed a little bit here, or influenced a little bit here by the fact that all four of those guys are currently in the NFL. And it's the only defensive back group I can look at and say all four are in the NFL. Like, 2019 and 18 and 19 both had Dane Jackson, Damari Mathis, and Damar Hamlin as starters. And those guys are all NFL players. But in 2018, Dennis Briggs was the other safety. And 2019, Paris Ford was the other safety. Neither one of those guys is in the NFL. That's probably the biggest concentration of NFL players outside of that 17 year. I mean, there's good groups here. But there's always one guy that you're like, yeah, I don't know. 2015, it was Avonte Maddox, Lafayette Pitts, Jordan Whitehead, and Terrence Webb. And I think Webb was okay, but I think Pitts was pretty good. Maddox and Whitehead, obviously NFL players. Webb maybe doesn't fit in with that group. 2016, Ryan Lewis and Avonte Maddox were the main corners, although they used a lot of guys that year because they dealt with some injuries. Whitehead and Webb were the safeties again. Yeah, I can't really put that group on the same level as, Dane Jackson, Avonte Maddox, Jordan Whitehead, and Damar Hamlin. I think those four guys in 2017 probably are the pinnacle. And while I think this year's secondary has played well, I think they've continued to get better week after week, particularly the corners, the inexperienced guys, Gandy and Battle. I don't know if they're going to have the legacy or the pro careers that Jackson, Maddox, Whitehead, and Hamlin have had. I mean, all those guys are playing and doing well in the NFL, and there's not really another group that compares to that. In terms of NFL caliber, I will say I think the 2021 and 22 crews. 2021, the starting corners were Damari Mathis and Marquez Williams. The safeties were Eric Hallett and Brandon Hill, and the next year it was Williams and MJ Devonshire with Hallett and Hill. You can make a pretty good case for those guys. I mean, those guys were really good. Hallett and Hill were really good. I was about to say maybe the best tandem of safeties they've had, but they've also had Whitehead and Hamlin. They had Hamlin and Ford in 2019, which you can say what you want about Paris Ford, but he made a lot of splash plays that year. We talked about this through the offseason. The safety pairings have been outstanding for Pitt. I mean, it's been arguably the best position of the Narduzzi era, the best position group. And when you look at where they've gone, since 2019, when it was Hamlin Ford, Hallett Hill, now McIntyre, McMillan. Presumably next year it'll be Cruz Brookins and Jesse Anderson. New guys, inexperienced guys, but talented guys who are going to play and I think be really good. So it's a really strong position group. I think the corners have been good too. But that 2017 quartet of Jackson, Maddox, Whitehead, and Hamlin, I think that one's the best. Big Show 2000 says, Chris, love the work you guys do here. Keep it up. More exciting running back in recent memory to watch. LaShawn McCoy or Desmond Reed. We've had our fair share of good running backs, but these two top my list in terms of how fun they are to watch. I'm giving a slight edge to Shady, but it ain't by much. Gosh, that's tough. LaShawn McCoy was a special player. Yeah, like a special player. The second best running back in Pitt history. And all due respect to Dion Lewis and James Conner, and Izzy Abanikanda, who broke some Tony Dorsett records. All due respect to Ironhead Hayward. Like, LaShawn McCoy is one of the top 5 individual players I've in terms of talent that I've covered at Pitt in the 20 years I've been doing this. Now, I came in the year after Larry Fitzgerald, or obviously he would be in that group as well. But, I mean, you're talking about, Aaron Donald, Jordan Addison, probably Tyler Boyd. There's some outstanding single-year performances. Abanikanda in 2022, Kenny Pickett in 2021. But in terms of just sheer dominance and being legitimately one of the best at his position in the sport, LaShawn McCoy for 2 years was right up there. And he got buried a little bit in terms of national recognition because he was on a 5-7 team in 2007. But he played his tail off. And there were a lot of points in 2007 and 2008 where it was McCoy against the world. You know what I mean? Where it was him and nothing else. Where he was just doing the Lord's work out there. And Pitt's defense was good in those 2 years, and that helped a lot. But, I mean, you look at the work he did against West Virginia in 2007 and 2008. You look at the work he did at Notre Dame in 2008 with that big win. And just week after week, grinding and making big plays on a team that really didn't have a lot of other offensive threats. In 2008, they brought in Jonathan Baldwin. By the end of that season, Matt Cavanaugh had figured out that Doran Dickerson was a good player. But there really weren't any other. If you were defending Pitt, you just had to stop LaShawn McCoy. Like, that was your number one objective because you weren't worried about the passing game because it was Pat Bostic and Bill Stull and Kevin Smith throwing passes. No disrespect to those guys, but they didn't exactly scare you. Nobody was losing sleep over the passing game those years, but they were losing sleep over LaShawn McCoy, who was one of the most dynamic playmakers in the country. Desmond Reed has been awesome. There's no question about it. I talked a lot about it yesterday, saying he's the MVP of this team. But there's a lot that you have to stop. And I'm not going to hold that against Desmond Reed, but he's not the only weapon on this team. LaShawn McCoy was, and he still put up great numbers and had great production. LaShawn McCoy, I don't know what Desmond Reed's NFL future is going to be, but that's not even what you're asking. You're asking who's the more exciting player to watch. That's tough because Reed is exciting. Every time he touches the ball, you think there's a chance that it could be the 78-yard punt return or the 72-yard long run or the long touchdown catch, the 50-yard catch or whatever it was against Cincinnati. I mean, he can do those things anytime. McCoy could too. And he was also able to grind it out and keep fighting and battling. It's tough. If you were asking me one running back to start a team with in their primes, I'd probably have to pick McCoy. Even though he didn't have the receptions that Desmond Reed does, at least in college, I think he showed in the NFL that he was a capable pass-catching back. And I think he probably could have done even more than he did at Pitt. But they're both pretty exceptional. Get those RBU shirts out again, right? Thunder Pit Road says, Chris, do you think Cal's scheme on defense last Saturday and their corresponding success against Pitt's offense exposed anything that any of Pitt's remaining opponents will try to replicate? I mean, I'm sure. Yeah, I think any upcoming opponent, any of these 6 teams who watch film of the Cal game, if it corresponds with the way they play defensively, they're going to try to replicate it to some extent. But don't forget that Cal came into that game already leading the nation in interceptions. So it's not like Cal had been playing just so-so defense and then figured something out against Pitt and had this great performance. They played really well. There's no question about it, but I think they were a really good defense coming into it. And so I don't know if they necessarily exposed anything. And I also would stand by, the idea that Pitt, Cade Bell, Eli Holstein helped Cal a little bit with how they tried to attack. I still think, Holstein has hit on a lot of those shots down the sideline. He's hit on a lot of those longer passes, and it's gotten, it's been exciting. And you got to take those shots. It helps you win games. You have to be willing to gamble and take some of those risks. but he really didn't offset it with more safe, high percentage, secure passes to pick up 7, 8, 10, 12 yards, which I think he did in other games too, that they were able to chip away. I mean, I think about like the touchdown to Sincere Lee at North Carolina, or the pass, the one really good pass across the middle to Raphael Williams at North Carolina. Like, stuff like that didn't seem to be all that prominently featured in Pitt's game plan, or at least in the passes that Holstein was throwing. And was he told to keep taking deep shots? I don't know. Should he, was he told, like, hey, look for some of this underneath stuff, look for some of this stuff in the flats, look to try and, chip away? I don't know. But I think there were probably more opportunities to do things like that. And so, Cal's defense might want to try to replicate things, or future defenses might try to replicate what Cal's defense did. I think it's up to Pitt to sort of ensure that that doesn't happen, or that it's not successful, by, again, taking what the defense gives you, taking what's there, which I think Holstein has mostly done a good job of, or did a good job of through the first 5 games, but didn't seem to have as good a feel for it in that Cal game. So, whatever approach a future defense tries to take, there's going to be something they're giving you. So take it and see what happens when you do. Because they got playmakers, right? They got guys who can take a pass and turn it into something big, a short or medium distance pass and turn it into something big. Try and make some of those plays. 121 Rum says, favorite fall bye week activity. That's a good question. We really like going to Erie. We really do. Like, it's beautiful in the fall. It's a beautiful drive up 79. I mean, it's fine drive up 79. But it's really nice being in Erie. I think Presque Isle is really nice. We like to get the bikes out and take a nice bike ride through Presque Isle. We're not doing that this weekend. There's some camping coming up and some other activities, but that's the first thing that comes to mind. Any kind of like trip, like a 2-hour trip or something. I think last fall we went to Cleveland for a weekend on one of the bye weeks. Just up and went, drove out. We might have driven out Saturday morning, actually, come to think of it, or maybe Friday night. I forget. And again, take the bikes, go ride in the national park or whatever. You know what I mean? Cuyahoga and all that stuff. Like, those are good fall activities. I wouldn't say we're big bike riders here in the Peak household, but we like to pedal a little bit. Couple more here. EJN3 says, question in regards to the new in-helmet communication system. The system cuts off with 15 seconds left on the play clock. Pitt snaps the ball quicker than that. Does this allow Cade Bell time to continue talking to Eli Holstein after the play call and help him determine run pass read and help him determine coverage, hot receivers, blitzes, etc.? No, I'm pretty sure it turns off in 15 seconds or when the ball is snapped. I don't think I don't think you can snap and have the coach in your head. And I don't even know if you would, like, it could be beneficial, but could also be information overload. And like what Cade Bell sees on the sidelines, he may say something and Eli Holstein might be looking in a different direction, and then you just jumble it up and end up taking more time. But I'm pretty sure it turns off at the snap. I don't think you can talk to him after the ball is snapped. So, and I don't know how much you would want to be able to do that. JRV MVP says, why doesn't Pitt do more to fill the stadium? Every high school, junior high, and grade school team should be given free seats if they come to the game with their coaches and wearing their game jersey all week long. 93.7 The Fan should be giving hundreds of tickets away for callers that want tickets. Youth sports groups could be given the same opportunity. Shouldn't the goal to be to do anything that creates more and future fans? The existing season ticket holders would have an opinion on fairness, but I think they would welcome more fans and an even better game experience. I kept thinking on Saturday that one factor, should Eli Holstein leave, would be the lack of crowd to play in front of. Somewhere out there in the universe, in the unexplored reaches of the cosmos, there's an answer to how to fill the stadium for Pitt games. And there's lots of things we've talked about over the years. New stadium that's smaller, right-sizing the current stadium, giving away tickets like you're suggesting, different types of ticket plans and packages and deals and discounts. Somewhere out there is a magic pill that solves the attendance woes, that gets people into the seats, that gets people to Acrisure Stadium. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's giving away hundreds of tickets every week and thousands of tickets or whatever. I don't know if that's it. To some extent, I mean, you need people to show up. And I don't get it on Saturday. I don't get what happened on Saturday with the attendance. I don't understand it. Like, what component was missing other than, like, Penn State, West Virginia, Notre Dame? Right? That was the only thing that was missing because it was a beautiful day. You've got a 5-0 team with an exciting offense playing against a unique opponent, a notable opponent, presenting a pretty interesting matchup in a huge game that is a chance to get to 6-0. You have a ranked team. Like, what holds you back from going to that game? Forget all the promos and giveaways and free tickets and all this other stuff. Like, how about your team is undefeated with one of the top offenses in the country coming into that game, and they're playing a very, very interesting game against an interesting opponent, and it's a beautiful day. I don't know what was missing. I'm not sure what element wasn't in place to compel Pitt fans to travel and to go to that game. I don't get it. Other than just to say, well, it's got to be Penn State, West Virginia, or Notre Dame, and maybe Clemson if Pitt's still doing well. And that's the only thing that'll drive fans to the game. I'm not really sure what else. I don't know what else you could possibly do because, if you can't even drum up that great of support under those circumstances that we saw on Saturday, I don't know if giving away hundreds of free tickets is going to help you all that much. I understand you want to build young fans, but I don't know if that's really going to accomplish the goal. Maybe people wouldn't even come if they had free tickets. Because maybe it's not cost. I mean, it doesn't cost that much to go to a Pitt game. I know it's not cheap. I know all sporting events are expensive once you add everything together, parking, tickets, concessions, and all of those things. But it's not that expensive. Relatively speaking, it's not that expensive to go to a Pitt game. So I don't know if cost is the major deterrent for people from going. I don't know what it is. All right, last one. Jay Lazinger says, do we get the sense that if he didn't get hurt, Daniel Carter would receive the end-of-game grinded-out carries? I don't think so. There's been a lot of talk about that final possession, on the post-game show, and then I asked it again on Twitter and on the message boards. I kind of put out that hypothetical about, if Cal had made the 40-yard field goal and took an 18-17 lead and Pitt got the ball back at, like, their own 20 with a minute 45 and a timeout, could they have, what would your confidence level be that they could drive down and get, win the game, either with a touchdown or a field goal? And it was a mix of responses. Most of the negative responses, most of the people who said they didn't think Pitt could do it, pointed to what actually happened on the final drive as evidence and said, well, they couldn't get 10 yards. How are we expecting them to get 40? Which is fair. But I think you got to understand that there were very different intentions in those two scenarios, right? On one, in one scenario where Cal makes the field goal, you're in a 2-minute drill. You're trying to drive 40 yards to get into field goal range, if not score a touchdown. You've got a minute 45. You've got, and I say 40 yards. It might be more like 45. If you start at your own 20, I think you want to get, at least to the 35. I know Ben Sauls made a 58-yarder earlier in the game, but I don't know if you necessarily say, oh, we only have to get to the 40. I think you're probably shooting for the 35 or the 30 if you can, just to make it a little bit more manageable. But if that's your objective, you're going about it very differently than how Pitt went about what they actually did on their final drive, where they took over, I think, the 22. It was a minute 50-something. They had the one timeout. But they're trying to protect the lead. They're up by 2, and they're trying to hold on to that lead and run as much clock as they can. So they hand it off to Desmond Reed. Second, I think they get 3 yards. On second down, they try to run a quarterback run, which maybe has a chance, except the snap is off target. Eli Holstein fumbles it and has to fall on it for like a 7-yard or a 4-yard loss. And then I think on 3rd and 11, they throw a 7-yard pass to Gavin Bartholomew. That's a very different approach than what it would have been if Cal had made the field goal and you're trying to drive down to get the win. But I digress. The situation they were in is somewhat similar to the situation they were in near the end of the Carolina game, where they ran 7 minutes off the clock, and we talked a lot about clock management and everything in that game. But I bring that up because you talk about Daniel Carter being the grinded out guy on that final drive at North Carolina where they were trying to kill as much time as they could. Desmond Reed was still the guy. Desmond Reed was the running back for that drive. And so I think if they were out in that situation, if they're in that situation where they're trying to run the clock out, I think Desmond Reed is still going to be their number one running back. I think he's going to be the guy who plays, gets the ball, and either the handoffs or catches passes, whatever it may be, because he's their guy. He's their number one back. So that's what I think. I don't know if they would have done anything different because a week earlier they did the same thing. All right, that's all our questions. We got through all, however many you guys had, 7 or so. So I appreciate everybody who chimed in with questions this week. A lot of good questions, a lot of fun conversation, discussion. Hopefully what we're trying to do for tomorrow actually comes together. You never really know. I don't want to promise too much and, count the chickens, et cetera, et cetera. But if it comes together, it's going to be cool. I'm really looking forward to it, and I hope you are too. So that's our Thursday edition of the mailbag. Hope I didn't throw your week off too much, but, as long as you're okay with it, like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com so you don't miss any of our Pitt video content. youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com for the Morning Pitt, the live streams, the post-game shows, all those things we do right here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So thanks for tuning in today. Thanks everybody who submitted a question. Hope you've had a great week. I hope you have a great Thursday, and we will catch up with you tomorrow for the Morning Pitt right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.